to organize your amazing ideas into a powerful book? You are in the right place.
At the right time to learn how to write your book.
Hi, I'm Joyce Glass.
And I'm Sherry Lynn Bisbano, and welcome to the Write Hour Nonfiction Tips from the Write Coach team. We are so glad you joined us today.
Welcome to episode 1103 of the Write Hour. This season is all about using the power of story in your nonfiction book and to market your book. It is always inspiring to hear the story of fellow writers and how they develop their career. Today's guest, Lacy Boggs, helps writers learn how to use the power of story in marketing their book. I know for many writers, marketing is a huge struggle. It's always been a struggle for me, so I completely relate. You've written this fabulous book, but you don't know how to connect with your potential readers. Lacy Boggs is a content strategist, author of the best-selling Kindle book, Make a Killing with Content, and the director of the Content Direction Agency. She helps small business owners fill their program or practice with content marketing. To learn more about Lacy, go to the show notes of this episode. All right, welcome to this episode of the Write Hour. I'm so excited to have Lacy Boggs with us. How are you doing, Lacy?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Wonderful. Well, Lacy and I met in a group called 20K Nation. We're in together, and so I'm excited to have her here because we realized we have very complementary businesses, and she is someone that you'll want to get to know because as a writer and just wanting to help you market your book, you're going to want to know what she knows and how she can help you. So tell us a little bit about you and your journey into writing, Lacy.
Well, I have been writing pretty much since I could hold a pencil. I've been telling stories since before that. So, I wanted to be a writer my whole life. And I remember when I was in 8th grade, I had a beloved English teacher and I told her I wanted to be a writer. And she told me that was great and that it was really hard to be a writer. So I should have something to fall back on. And so I actually took that and ran with it. I thought I would be a TV journalist. So I got into the TV and video magnet in high school. And from there decided I wanted to be a filmmaker. And P.S., by the way, it is not easier to work in film than to be a writer. But tell that to 17-year-old me, you know. So I actually went to film school. I have a degree in moving image arts and tried to work in Hollywood. That didn't work out. And so from there, I went back to my love of writing. I worked in PR for a little while, and then I got jobs as editors of specialty magazines. So I did travel magazines for a while, and then I was the food editor at a hyper-local magazine here in Colorado until I got pregnant and didn't want to work 60-hour weeks and 3 a.m. deadlines anymore.
I don't know.
And I don't know why. Yeah. And struck out on my own. And so I went freelance for a while. And then I realized that my niche could be ghost blogging, which is what my company does now. We help business owners create the content that gets them seen, heard, and paid. So we do ghost blogging for other people's small businesses and other types of content marketing and copywriting.
Yes. And what is the name of your company again?
The Content Direction Agency.
All right. Awesome. Well, how do you help writers? Because I know that that's actually part of what you do with your agency.
Yeah. So we've had a couple of authors and thought leaders. Thought leaders and authors are two types of people we love to work with because you guys have a wealth of knowledge in that brain thing of yours, and you need to get it out there in order to sell more books. And so part of what we do is help. So just because you're a writer, just because you're an author, doesn't mean you are a content writer or a content marketer. So we help you figure out how to put out content that will help sell more books without giving away the farm, right? Because that's something I see that authors run into a lot is they're like, I don't know what to blog about. I need to be writing my book.
Definitely. And that's the thing, like you said, just because you can write doesn't always mean you can write content. And content marketing is a little bit different. And it is something that a lot of writers struggle with, because if that's not your flair, that's not your genre that you're used to, it does take a little bit different way of thinking about the writing. And so it is good to have someone like Lacy on your team, even if she just does a little bit, to help you out. Because as she had told me one time, one of her authors, he got, was it a 6-book deal?
4 books, yeah, for the Financial Times, yeah.
Yeah, and he had to be writing. He was on deadlines. He didn't have time to be out there. But you just because you get a project like that doesn't mean you stop marketing.
Exactly.
You still have to market. Writers need to market while they're writing their book. So how can they use story in their marketing? Because this season we're talking about the power of story, and I know that that's something you're passionate about too, is helping people relay their story. So how can they do that in their marketing?
Right. So marketing is a story, right? There's a beginning and a middle and an end. A customer is on a journey when they are considering buying something from you. So they start out at a completely unaware place. Maybe they don't even understand that the problem they have is the one you solve. And then you educate them, you move them along that path until they're like, yeah, that's what I need. Take my money. I need your solution, right? I often talk about content marketing is like putting rocks in a river. If you imagine your customer or your client or the person who's going to buy your book on one side of the river, and the sale is on the other side of the river. Content are the rocks you throw in to get them from one side to the other. Now, if you just throw them all in willy-nilly, it's going to be really hard for them to get to a sale, right? If there's not enough of them or they're not spaced close enough together, it's going to be hard and they're just going to roll off down the river, never to be heard from again, right? But if you put in the right rocks at the right frequency, close enough together, then it makes it really easy for that person to go from being just somebody in your audience to becoming a customer. So that's kind of what I mean when I talk about marketing as a story. What is their story? They're the hero, right? The customer is the hero of your marketing story. You are like the Gandalf. You're the mentor character. You're not the hero. So when you're writing your marketing story, if you think of it that way, you can say, what do they need? What questions are they asking? How can I help educate them so that they understand that my solution, whatever your solution is the right one to answer their problem? Whether that solution is like, for a fiction book, I need entertainment. I need a particular kind of entertainment. Or if it's a nonfiction book and you're actually solving a literal problem for them. Either way, it works out.
I love that. I love how you said taking them on a journey with you and that they're the hero and you're just this guide, that is a great way to think of that, because you want to help them along, and people are more receptive to a guide than someone going, I have the answer. You need to listen to me. Right.
Right. Too often in marketing, people think that they're the hero. We think that as the business owner or as the author or the thought leader, that we are the hero of the story, but we're really not. We're just Dumbledore. We're just the mentor.
There you go. Well, what is a common mistake you see writers making in their marketing?
Yeah. So the most frequent thing I hear from authors is that they don't know what to blog about, or they don't know what kind of content to be putting out there. And I think this is especially true with fiction authors, because they're like, what am I going to? So probably the biggest mistake I see authors make is that they talk about the how of writing. So they'll write posts about what they know, which is how to write. So they'll say like, here's how I make a character, or here's how I do a scene, or whatever it is. The problem is that your audience for your book are not writers, unless you're writing a book about how to be a writer, right? But most of us are not. So we're making the mistake of speaking to our colleagues instead of speaking to our customers. So you actually have to take a step back. It's true of all of us that it's easier to write how-to content, right? Because we know how to do something. That's our career. That's what we're doing. So it's much easier then to say, well, I'm going to write how to write a book, or I'm going to write how to whatever it is. Right. But sometimes that's not the content that your ideal customer needs. They might need why to. They might need, why do I need to read this book, or be inspired, or be entertained, or be educated in something else, mindset, for example, around solving a problem? Do they need to be educated in what their real problem is? If you're a nonfiction author, a lot of times people think they have one problem and that they have a different problem. And so you have to close that gap before they're ready to buy your book.
Right. I love that. And one of my favorite authors is Hallie Richmond. I love how she markets. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, read any of her stuff.
No, I don't think so.
She actually self-publishes. And what she has done to complement her fiction is she loves to cook. She has cookbooks. And so she has Harry Crocker it's Harry Crocker Cooking or something like that. All of her cookbooks are a parody title of, some other fiction book or movie or something.
Fun.
And so that makes it really interesting. And that's an interesting way she brings people in. So on her blog, she has recipes and stuff because that's something she loves. And she'll, like if it's a book set in a certain era or location, she'll have recipes that go with that. So I thought that's a neat thing to do. And I'll put her link in here too as someone to look at her marketing. Because she does a lot of her book marketing, really coordinates well with her fiction writing. And because I know for fiction writers, it is hard. It is hard.
It is really hard. I think of writers like John Green has a really huge following to his blog and his social medias. And he has taken a different tact where he really has conversations with his followers. And I don't know if they still do it, but he and his brother used to have a YouTube channel and they would talk about things. But that made it so that his followers desperately wanted to read his books when they came out. Another person that I think of is, are you familiar with Rainbow Rowell? I'm not sure I'm saying her last name right.
No.
She wrote a book called Fangirl that was literally about a girl writing fan fiction. And there was so much she talked about on her blog and so on about the story that all of her fans were like, we have to hear this. We have to know the story she was writing fan fiction about. So then she wrote 2 more books that are the story she was like, it's very meta, but she created this whole, I know of several fiction authors who have written books in response to fan demand that was happening on their blogs, which is really cool when you can have that kind of
yeah, that is cool that the fans like, hey, this is what I need.
Yeah,
I want to know the rest of this story. And
exactly.
I know I have finished book novels and I'm like, but what about this?
I need to know the other story.
Yes, really what happened here. And that's a good book when it keeps you going and it keeps you thinking like, ooh, well, what about this and what about that? So it makes you want another book or want to know more about another character kind of thing. So that is
There's another indie author I know of. His name is Sam Starbuck, and he actually publishes online the first draft of his novels, or maybe not the first draft, but a draft, and then gets feedback from his audience before he self-publishes. So people can read the whole novel first and give him feedback of where there's holes or what they want more information on. And it's almost a co-creation process. It's really cool. But then he does just fine when they go to publication as well, because people want to have it. They want to hold on to the thing that they helped co-create, which I think is very exciting.
Well, and that's smart. That's smart marketing, because then also they're invested in that project because they've been a part of it.
Right.
I like that because same kind of thing with David Mike. He blogged his book, Dishonor, and it's about his story. But when it came out, everybody wanted it because it wanted the whole thing,
Yeah.
And we've been on this journey with him for 2 years because he blogged about it for 2 years before it was actually ready for publication. So it's smart marketing. It really is.
That's actually how I wrote my business book. My nonfiction book it's a lot of the content, I would say, is taken from my blog posts that I then, edited and synthesized into a body of work, right? Because blog posts are sort of disjointed. They don't necessarily follow a big grand plan. But when you have several years of a back catalog, it's pretty easy to find themes and edit them and create, the transitional material so that then you all of a sudden have a book.
Exactly. So tell us a little bit about your writing time. Do you have a consistent time that you like to write, or is there something that's worked for you, something that didn't? Do you write daily?
Yeah, so I do a lot of writing for my business, obviously, so for my clients. And I tend to I've blocked out my calendar so that I have delivery days versus like sales and marketing days. So for example, today is a sales and marketing day. So I have calls all day long. Mm-hmm. And then like Monday, Wednesday, Friday are my more like, I need to be head down in my writing. I find that it's difficult for me to, for example, be writing something and then have to stop and take a sales call and then go back to writing. It's difficult for me to get in and out of it. And I also have discovered that sometimes when I'm writing, I don't look up for 2 or 3 hours and I miss an appointment because I'm just so deep in it. So I've tried to separate the days that way. That's for my business writing. For personal writing, it's sort of like I try not to push it because I do so much writing in my daily work. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I just have to wait for the fiction to come. I did do NaNoWriMo last year and I did win NaNoWriMo. But I think that was a fluke, to be perfectly honest with you, because I wasn't doing as much writing for work during that month. It was kind of a slow month. So yeah, I tend to schedule my work writing, and I actually find it's a lot easier to write for other people. I don't hit writer's block as often. Something about it, I guess I'm probably one step removed from the material. So it's a little easier for me to just crank it out, just do what needs to be done when it needs to be done. I think having a plan is also really important. I never sit down for a client and have like page write because I know exactly what I'm going to create. I know there's nothing like I'm not creating from whole cloth ever. I have a plan that I'm working to that the client and I worked out ahead of time. So it's never like, oh, I have writer's block. I don't know what to create because we have a plan.
Yes, that does make a difference. And also having the days is perfect because I do something very similar. I have my writing times is supposed to be in the morning. Doesn't always work that way, but mornings I block out for that, and then just Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays afternoons do podcast interviews, calls, that kind of thing. That way, it keeps my schedule where I have time that I can just focus on writing or on my client work, whatever it is that I need to do. So that's a perfect way to do that. And for those of you that you're trying to find your rhythm, just my whole thing is be intentional. If having certain days doesn't work for you, figure out what does work for you. Certain times of the week are better, or Saturday morning's better for you if you're still working, those kind of things is the best way to just figure it out, but be intentional and plan it out. And I know for me, if I plan out my week, I am more likely to get those projects done than if I start the week and go, what do I need to work on this week? So if I have, and if you just break it down in little steps, like, hey, I'm going to work on chapter 1, get the first draft done, and that's your main goal for the week, then that's it. It's one baby easy step to do. And then the next week, whatever it is, work, edit chapter 1 or research for chapter 2, that kind of thing. So I love that you do break that up, and we all have busy lives, and so there's always going to be something that doesn't go just perfect, but you just keep plugging.
Yeah.
Keep plugging, because I doubt if every Monday and Friday work perfectly for you. You get everything done just right.
Yeah. No. And you and I were talking about before last week that we both try not to schedule appointments on Friday because Friday is my catch-up day.
Mm-hmm.
In a perfect world, Friday is my thinking time and my big picture planning and dreaming for my business time. But in a more realistic world, it's the day that I catch up on things that I didn't quite finish the rest of the week. So I like building that white space into my calendar. I also, this may or may not work when you're writing a book, but when I'm blocking out, okay, I have a project I need to work on, I actually double how long I think it will take. So for example, if I think it will take me an hour to write this blog post, I double it. I put down 2 hours in my calendar because that way, if it takes me an hour and 15 minutes, if it takes me an hour and 30 minutes, I still have some wiggle room. And if it takes me 2 hours, that's okay too. But that way I'm not scrambling. So it's like I trick myself, I was like, okay, I think it'll take an hour. So I'm going to block out 2 hours just in case.
That's an excellent point to make, that giving yourself that extra time, because that's something that I've had to learn. My husband told me for years that I always tried to cram too much into a day. And until it was about 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 4, I started actually blocking out time on my calendar where I could visually it on Google Calendars. Mm-hmm. And I realized, I really can't get all it because
there's really not enough hours. Yeah.
I've done all of my stuff long enough to know about how long it takes me to do things now. And so I look at it and okay, well, I might need more than 2 hours, but at least I'll get 2 hours in on it today, and I can kind of manipulate my schedule and figure it out. And there's some days that I'm like, I need to do this, this, and this. And I start putting it on the calendar and go, that is
not going to happen.
I don't want any sleep today.
Right. And I've always been very intentional about, I started this business to be home with my daughter. Mm-hmm. So especially when she was littler, it was very important to me to have, this is business time and this is family time. So in the 8 years I've been doing this, I've never worked more than 20 hours a week on average. And so I really have to be very mindful about how I'm scheduling that time.
Right.
And where it's going.
Right. Because your time's a premium. And so and I think that's the thing too, when we, our time is sacred like that. And you are trying to, do other things, whether you're working another job or you have a child that you're trying to take care of. It is being mindful of that. And it's that whole, you can actually get more done than you realize in some cases too, if you plan it.
Right.
Just being, like I said, the whole thing, being intentional, with your time, because you'll eventually get that project done. And you can, after you write a while, you'll know, hey, it takes me about an hour to write a chapter or 2 hours to write a chapter or get 1,000 words in, whatever it is. And you'll be able to gauge, okay, to get my chapter totally written, it took a week. And then it took me another week to edit it. So I want to write 10 chapters. Well, that's going to take me 20 weeks because chapter I'm taking 2 weeks on. So you can think it out like that. And I like being able to think it out. And then you can set that goal, hey, in 20 weeks, I'll have my first draft done really good as best as I can. It'll be ready for the editor and we can see what it needs from there,
Right.
Well, what words of advice and encouragement do you have for writers who are struggling to write their book, or maybe they've never written a book?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think if I were going to distill it down, it would be that you have to kill your perfectionism. Because, I said I've been writing since I was a kid, but the first time I tried to write an original novel and finish it, I worked on that book for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't until, now I did get married and have a baby and move cross country in that amount of time, but I was still plugging away at it. And it wasn't until I hired a book coach that I finally got through it. Right. And I finally finished the draft and had a full length book that I had written and blah, blah, blah. And then literally that same year, so I think I finished it, I want to say in like March or something of that year. That same year, November rolls around, I did NaNoWriMo and I wrote a whole book length thing in a month. Mm-hmm. So I went from doing 10 years to a month. And I think really the only difference is that I gave up wanting to write my staggering work of heartbreaking genius, right? I gave up my perfectionism. I gave up saying, this has to be the best thing I've ever written ever. And it has to be perfect. And it has to be the great American novel. Like as soon as I let myself off the hook on that, it was a hell of a lot easier and more fun to write.
Oh yeah.
I mean, my business book that I wrote happened very oddly because I had a mentor who was filming for Creative Live. I don't know if you're familiar with that website, but they do courses and they film them live and then they sell them afterward. So she was doing a class about how to write a book, and she asked for people to come be in the audience, and I got chosen. So I flew to San Francisco, got to be in the audience for this class. Only then did I realize it was how to write a book in a week. And as the producers were there, they were like, so we're really excited. We want to promote your book that you write. And I'm like, wait, what? So I ended up not actually writing it in a week. I took a month, but I wrote an 18,000 word business book that was a bestseller on Kindle and still makes me about $200 a month doing absolutely nothing to market it. So it can 100% be done.
Yeah.
And it's all about removing those barriers like to perfectionism. Because if you're like, this is the only book I'm ever going to write and it has to be perfect and it has to be a bestseller and it has to be my heartbreaking work of staggering genius, you're going to get stuck.
Yeah, because that you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself.
A lot of pressure.
And that's something I talk about a lot is when you're first writing that first draft, whether it's novel, nonfiction, just get it out. Just get the ideas out. And then you go back and make them pretty, because those are two different activities. The creative writing sessions are a totally different aspect of your brain than the editing side, which is your analytical side of your brain. So you want to make sure you're not doing both at the same time. That's where your perfectionism stalls you out. It exhausts you. You get, a lot of doubt. I'm never going to get this done. I'm not the right person for this. Maybe it won't be good. Nobody's going to read it. And you start all that self-talk because you keep, it's not perfect. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. And if you let go of it's not perfect, that's what editors are for.
It doesn't have to be perfect.
Right.
If you've ever read a bad book, it doesn't have to be perfect. That stuff gets published anyway.
Exactly. And so you want to make sure that you hire an editor, but don't worry about that until after you've written it and you go back and take classes, learn the writing process. What I teach my clients in the TWC Writing Club and my Write My Book Bootcamp course, it's the same concept, just different ways I'm teaching it, is there's a process. And if you follow the process, it makes it so much easier and simpler, and you let go of that perfectionism. So that's an excellent tip, to let that go, because I hear it a lot. I mean, I have, I know one, and there may be two in the group now that's in the TWC Writing Club, that she spent a year on her first chapter. And I was like, a year? Like, you could have written 12 other chapters since then. And you've been tinkering around with this one. And when we talked about this very thing, she was like, oh my goodness, this is so much easier. I'm like, I told you. It's so much easier. So definitely great point. Well, Lacy, it has been wonderful having you here today, and I appreciate it. We'll put all your links in the show notes, and you can learn more about Lacy and her business in the show notes as well. So thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Write Hour. Our goal is to help you achieve your writing dreams.
You are one step closer to write your book.
Learn how to get the book out of your head with the 4 steps we teach our clients. Sign up for the free email series at therightcoach.biz. The link is in the show notes.
The 4 steps help you clarify your focus, create and organize your content, and complete your book. We share tips on the writing process, and you can download the writing planner to track your progress.
Don't let fear and overwhelm keep you from writing your book.
It's time to write your book.